The following interview was conducted with LaJanae Turner on behalf of the My Housing Story Oral History Project. It took place on Tuesday, May 21st at Mercy Housing, California in San Francisco. The interviewer is me, Anna Alexander. All right. Hi, LaJanae.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah? So LaJanae and I know each other because she is currently a BayHIP intern. That's the Bay Area Housing Internship Program. And I'm on the advisory board for that. So we met, I guess, a year ago?
Yes.
Is that it? Yeah, at orientation. And ever since, she said she has a really good housing story and was ready to tell it. So that's why we're here today. You ready?
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for doing this. Okay, so first off, tell me a little bit about your background. Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
Okay, so I was born in El Paso, Texas on an Army base. My father is African American, my mom is Korean, and I don't really remember anything about El Paso because right after that I lived the next memory I have is living in Virginia, Vienna, Virginia for elementary school. I stayed out there for the entire elementary school and then moved to California, in which this has been my home ever since. So, 92, I believe it was, is when I moved to San Francisco. And I guess if you ask me where I'm from, then I think I'm going to have to say San Francisco because that's where I've been the longest.
And you were in middle school when you came here?
Yes, middle school.
San Francisco? Okay.
Yes.
So what was that situation like when you had to move all the way to San Francisco?
When we moved to San Francisco, we stayed with my grandmother. So it was me and my two sisters, my mother, father, and my grandmother already had people in her house. So it was both of my grandparents, my cousin, and my uncle living there already. So it was a very tight situation, very crowded in the house.
So you were going from living with just your parents and your two sisters, like on army bases and such, to...
Well, we lived in an apartment. We only stayed in the army base in El Paso.
Oh, okay. Then to your grandma's in San Francisco with how many people did you say?
About 9.
9 people. Wow. What was that like as a middle school girl in the 90s? I was a middle school girl in the 90s, so I can imagine.
Everyone was so strict with us, we could never go out of the house. Like, if we go anywhere, we could play in front of the house, so we couldn't go anywhere. And then it was always an argument or a fight in the house. And so it was, like, really chaotic growing up.
Yeah. Tell me about the neighborhood that you lived in.
Everyone was on drugs at that time.
Where was it?
Hunters Point.
Okay.
Yeah. San Francisco, Hunters Point. And we were one of the people that just, lived in a house. But there's a lot of people that lived in apartments and things like that. So the neighborhood was being run down by drug addicts and things like that. The crime rate started going up. And I just remember going to my first funeral in 7th grade where a girl that walked to the bus stop with us every day was murdered in her house by her cousin. So it was terrible. Like, I thought that was very traumatic, but it was even more traumatic just knowing just seeing it happen more and more every year. So more people that I knew were dying like every year.
So did you feel unsafe walking around and living in your neighborhood?
At first I felt unsafe, but then I felt like since I was the oldest, I was the oldest granddaughter and I was the oldest sister, I had to be bigger than everyone else. Like I couldn't be scared. So I had to be the one that people were scared of.
What does that mean?
I got into a lot of fights. I got into fights because I didn't want to fight, but people wanted to fight me because they thought I was weak. But then when I would fight back, I became popular and nobody messed with me.
Were you ever fighting to protect your siblings or?
Yeah. Most of the time it was, I don't know. Okay, so when I was in Virginia, there was nothing but white people throughout everywhere you go. and it was maybe 4 black people in the whole entire elementary school. So I went through a lot of racism in
Yeah.
but that was what I was used to, just that environment. But coming to California, it was like culture shock. That now I'm around all these black people, but since I'm half Korean, a lot of the black girls didn't like me. I looked different. My hair was long,
Mm-hmm.
and so they didn't like me. And I remember starting middle school, I got bullied a lot, got into a bunch of fights. But after I beat up this one popular girl, they stopped messing with me. So
Just show a little strength.
she followed me home, and I had to beat her up. So she didn't bother me anymore. But my sisters would always get into it, and I would have to like stand up for them too. So I guess I was just the one that no one messed with anymore.
Wow. And she lived in your neighborhood and went to school with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So how long were you living with your grandma and the 8 other people?
I lived with my grandmother all the way until 8th grade, and then my dad got an apartment in one of the worst projects in San Francisco, and we moved in with him. And since it was just me and my sisters and him, it was bad.
Yeah.
It was like so bad. It was like he was on, drugs, high every day, and we never had anything. He sold all of our stuff. We didn't have like good food to eat. We ate crap. But it was hard, He ended up losing that place, and then my mom, she left a while ago because of like, they were going through like spousal abuse and stuff. But she ended up opening up a business on Mission Street. Mm. So she came and got us, and we ended up staying in the back of her store.
Oh, wow.
For a while. We stayed in the back.
Instead of with your dad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was bad with him.
Sounds like it.
We never had food or anything. It was terrible.
How long did you live in the back of her store?
So.
And what kind of store did she have?
It was dry cleaners.
Okay.
On Mission Street. So, I stayed with her for a while because I got pregnant at 16. Well, I got pregnant at 15. I ended up having a child at 16, and I still wanted to go to school, so I ended up going to a teenage pregnancy school, and she ended up getting me an apartment upstairs. It was like a little studio apartment, so I could, have my own responsibility.
Yeah.
And I was still young. I still wanted to go out, hang out and stuff like that. But I was more secure with my mother than any other situation. Anyway, she ended up losing that place. It's bad. She lost that place because, I don't know, I think someone was coming over to look for me. And they were making so much noise in the hallway, so the neighbors complained. So she got an eviction from that. I wasn't even there. But I ended up moving back to my grandmother's house, and I think when I turned
with your child,
okay, with my son, when I turned 19, I was pregnant with my second child, and I was in an abusive relationship. So at first I was living with him, and I moved back with my grandmother to get away from that situation. And my grandmother, since I was the black sheep, she didn't give me a room. She made me sleep on the couch in the living room. So that's where I stayed most of the time, in the living room, until a little after my daughter was born, my second child. I got my own apartment then. It was the first time I got my own apartment.
How were you able to afford your own apartment? Were you working?
It was actually through Housing Authority.
Oh, okay.
So I was on the waiting list for Housing Authority, and they called me one day and said I have my own apartment. And I was about 21 at that time. So I wasn't at my grandmother's house too long, but oh gosh, thank God I had that place.
How'd you know about Housing Authority? Did you?
One thing about my family, we were really poor, but very resourceful. Mm-hmm. Like my uncles, they told me things that I would never have thought of. Like, oh, you lost your job. Why don't you get unemployment? I've been working since I was 12. Mm-hmm. So once Once something happened, they'll say, "Oh, you lose your job. Why don't you get unemployment?" And I used to be like, "What's that?" "Oh, okay, I'll get that." And it was free money, and I couldn't believe that someone would actually give you free money. And then when I turned 18, they told me about welfare. Oh, you can get free money and free food stamps for your kid. So when I turned 18, I got that. And then every year they would tell me, "Oh, since you were working, why don't you file your taxes?" But they were in drugs, so they were looking forward to me for me to get money so they can ask me, can they borrow it?
Oh.
Never pay me back.
Man, uncles. But I mean, I'm sure it helped.
Yeah, it helped a lot
through.
to let me know all the different types of resources that were out there. Yeah. So anyway, 21, I had 3 kids. My husband went to prison, and I was a single mother trying to do it by myself. I had a good job at the airport at 21, but I ended up losing my childcare person. So I had to quit my job, and then I had to move back to my grandmother's house again.
Wow.
So now I'm at my grandmother's house, and I had to give up my youngest daughter to her grandmother because the house was so crowded, and we were sleeping on the couch, and I didn't want my daughter to experience that. She was the youngest, and so her mother came and got her. She was about, I think she was 1. She just turned 1.
Where did they live?
In Oakland.
Okay, at least in the Bay Area.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I got to see her like on the weekends and things like that, but it was like my daughter went through like some emotional problems like in the beginning, but like right now she's at peace with my decision.
Mm-hmm. How old is she now?
17.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And your oldest is
21.
21. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So so you've moved back. I'm trying to keep track now. You've moved back to your grandma's house 3 times?
Whew.
Between the time you were in middle school till you were like 23?
Yeah. Moved back about 3 times. And this last time that I stayed with her was like...
Was that the last time?
She hated me. Yeah. She did not want me there. She would like pick fights with me for no reason, say that I'm on drugs and I'm not on drugs. She called CPS on me and told them that I'm too young to have kids and they need to take my kid, and I'm on drugs and stuff. And then when they came to do the evaluation, they were like, "Why would she say those things about you?" And I said, "My grandmother hates me for no reason. I don't know."
Do you speak to her?
She died. She died while I was in college. So I did take care of my grandmother before she died. Mm. I did take her groceries every month. I take her groceries and, get her up, take a shower, bathed her and everything, because at that time I was like nurse assistant. Oh. So I had the skills to take care of elderly people.
Oh my!
I know.
So these were formative years for you. These were like years when you're middle school, high school, early.
Yeah. Well, actually, 20s. In my 20s, I did try to go to City College because I was gonna still try to go to college, and I wanted to be, because I was so depressed. Like, my kids gave me the strength. I wanted to do everything for them, so I wanted to go to college because nobody in my family went to college. My dad went for like maybe a year and quit, but I said I was going to be the one to break that cycle. So I went to City College, and I went there for like maybe 2 semesters, and I was doing good. And then it was like an incident came up where my grandmother kicked me and the kids out of the house. So we had to live in the car, and I had a career at the time. I was a case manager, and I was going to college. And sorry, that really hurts. She kicked me out the house, and we didn't have anywhere to go. We slept in the car maybe like 2 days, and then it was to the point where I had to tell my kids that they had to stay with their grandmother and other family members until I could try to find a way for us to survive. Oh. So my housing story was like really messed up. And I was homeless for maybe about um 3 weeks, and those were like the hardest 3 weeks of my life because my life, it was like I went to survival mode. I started doing things that I didn't want to do, like sell drugs to make sure my kids had food, um, that they had clean clothes wherever they were. So paying the people to let them stay there, you know. So it was really hard. And one day I just called Housing Authority, and I was on their waiting list after I applied. I didn't want to stay at my grandmother's house, so I just remember I applied somewhere during that time, and I called them one day when felt like I was at the end of my rope. I called them and told them I couldn't do it anymore. I told them my situation, that I was living in the car with my kids, and we didn't have anywhere to go. And they said, at first they told me that they didn't have anything available, so that kind of like killed my spirit. But they called back, like, I don't know, maybe like an hour or two later. They called back and said they have a place available and I could move in on a Monday. So
what a relief.
Yeah. And I got the place, and it was having my own place again, and it was like having to start all over again with life. I think my life repeated itself. Like I had to start over like 3 or 4 times.
And how old were your kids at that point?
They were in elementary school.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they were in elementary school. Deja was about, I think she was in kindergarten or first grade, and my son is 2 years older than her, so he was like in 3rd or 4th grade.
And you were able to get them to school every day, even when you were living in your car?
Absolutely.
Wow.
I didn't want them to think that their world was different. So every morning I would be there to get them dressed, take them to school, make sure they had clean clothes, brush their teeth, everything. Did my daughter's hair, or I paid someone to do her hair so she would be ready to go to school.
Wow. Do they ever talk about this? Do they remember this time?
Not really.
Pretty young.
They do remember. They remember where they lived, you know, because that wasn't really great either. We lived on the worst projects in San Francisco. I think, in my own experience, I've lived in the worst projects, 2 of them. The first time with my dad, and then the second time when it was my own place there. So one of them is West Point and one of them is Harbor. And they're right, I guess, like a block away from each other streetwise. I don't know how to explain it, but in Hunters Point, it's like hills. So you could see one project from the other project on these hills. And they were beefing with each other.
Oh, no.
They were in such a war with each other that it was just like, it got to the point where the feds labeled anybody associated with those 2 territories, they would get indicted with with a label of gang affiliation.
Was it gang related? Or?
They had gangs.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to call it a gang or a turf, but to me it was like turf wars. Like West Point, they had many different levels to it. Some of the things were like baby man sick or junior man sick. These were like little groups of people, but they all were affiliated in one project. And then on Harbor Road, you had, you know, Harbor was very notorious throughout even to this day, they're still notorious. Because you can't go through there, you can't drive through there without people looking at your car and seeing who you are. If you're not from there, then it's already a problem, you know. And I lived there, so it was like a lot of my friends and family didn't go there.
Did you feel safe?
I did. I felt safe. I had a candy house, so I sold candy and slushies and chips and things like that out of my window. to have extra income, and everyone knew me. And I was like the coolest person in the neighborhood.
Did you have a cool name, like candy lady name?
No, they either would say I'm going to the slushy house or I'm going to the candy house.
Okay. Did you feel like you had a good sense of community while you lived there?
No, I was isolated.
Yeah. Even though you were the slushy house.
I stayed in the house.
Yeah.
I was scared to go outside. I didn't affiliate with people. I barely let my kids go outside because, I remember one thing. One time my son came, he used to play outside with some little boys. But this is how bad it is. It starts with the kids. He said, Mom, he came in the house and he was about to cry. He said, Mom, this boy outside wants to fight me and he's my friend. I was like, that's not your friend if he wants to fight you. And he said, I know, but if I don't fight him, the other boys are going to beat me up. I said, Tay, like, I know from the experience of being in the street that he can't be a punk, especially if we live there. If he doesn't fight them, then he will be labeled a punk and they would fight him every day. So I told him, I had to tell him, do not be a punk. Do not be scared of that boy. That's not your friend. Go outside and fight him. And you better beat him up. Because if you don't beat him up, then they're going to beat you up every day. And that was the truth. And after he beat that boy up, they never messed with him again. And they were friends again. You know, right after the fight, it's crazy.
Oh, my.
That's how bad it was. But I had to... That's the hardest thing for a mother to do to protect her kids, you know, especially a boy growing up in those areas. And I had to tell him what I had to learn, you know, growing up, because if he let a bully keep bullying him, they will do it every day, torment him, make him run in the house, you know. And I didn't want him to have that kind of fear in him, you know, especially where we live. So. Yeah.
Do you think you would have reacted differently if the housing situation had been different?
That's why I moved my kids out of San Francisco.
Really? Okay.
Away from these projects.
Really?
When we moved to Contra Costa, we started staying in houses. Like, I haven't been in an apartment in I don't know how many years. I'm on Section 8 now, so I still get government assistance, but we live in a house. And I got them away from those environments, but, you know, they still grow up with their own mind state, but it's not as bad as San Francisco, where when my son would be like 17 or 18, I'm thinking years ago, when my son turns 18, I have to, like, be able to protect him at all times, because all the people that I knew growing up were dying at like 17, 18, 20, 21, you know, 16, 17, 18. I lost so many friends. I don't have enough fingers or toes for my obituary stack is like a box at home.
Oh, that's so tough. Oh my goodness.
I'm so sorry to overwhelm you with
this. This is just, you've had quite
a story.
Quite a story. I'm looking here. We have this chronology of your time. So
let's start with Contra Costa.
Yeah, so there. This is around. Yeah, you moved to Contra Costa. You're in Section 8, but you're in houses this time. Okay.
Yes.
And it sounds like, were you around 28 at that point?
When I actually moved out of San Francisco, I was about 25.
Okay.
I started going back to school in 28 when I felt like my kids were a little older now, and I can go to school without having to worry about them getting into a lot of trouble. Like, my mom could come watch them sometimes and things like that, or they would be old enough to lock the doors and stay in the house. So I started going back to school at 28, and I fell in love with college. I fell in love with college so much. The information, the knowledge, the things that I didn't know, it got me in tune with the world, you know. I stayed in junior college for about 4 or 5 years, and I got 4 degrees.
Whoa, what'd you get?
Anthropology, sociology, liberal arts, and psychology, and I graduated with honors.
Wow. And then you went on to CSU East Bay.
Yep, transferred to CSU East Bay. And there I was going to do psychology, but it started getting really difficult for me because I thought I was doing good, but I wasn't. So I switched over to sociology, which I'm very proud of because I got to learn a lot about the societies that I live in. One of my favorite classes was research and methods, because when I started doing research on the things that interest me, like the things in society, like housing, I started to understand, why these things happen.
So it was school that got you interested in housing, but you probably were reflecting a lot on your own experiences.
Well, school didn't say, hey, you want to learn about housing.
Yeah, there wasn't a class on housing, right?
Right. It opened my mind to pick, my interests. Like, what are you interested in that, you want to do a paper about? And since I went through all of these different experiences in life, I came to this conclusion in my life that I want to be able to give back to society. I want to give back to the community. I want to be a liaison for people that need help. So how can I do that? And then I had to build the understanding of what am I dealing with, and housing was my choice subject. So when I started learning about housing, it was like the thing I started learning about was concentrated poverty. Like when you concentrate poverty, when you what happens in those types of situations, and when all the research that I read talked about me. It was like teenage pregnancy, that was me. High crime rates, I lived all around it, socioeconomic disadvantages, like being not having access to good schools and education and stuff like that. That was me. It was like all this research that people did before me. It was all the research that I was doing was all about me.
So this research and research methods class, did you write a paper about housing?
I did, actually.
What was
it? Called Segregated Housing. Hold on, let me think about it. It was called Segregated Housing, Concentrated Poverty, and High Crime Rates.
Wow.
And that's exactly what I did. I read so many different research articles on those different topics, the high crime rates and segregated poverty. I learned what segregated poverty was and what housing projects were meant to be when they first created them to what they turned out to be now. So I learned a lot about housing and segregation and poverty, and what happens when you concentrate poverty.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting.
So that was your senior year at East Bay, I take it?
No, it was actually my junior year.
Did that paper, that housing research, launch you into where you're at right now?
It did. It paved the path because, like I said, I wanted to give back to the community. So right before I graduated, I took a business class that helped with resumes and things like that to prepare you for the world, because I couldn't pass my writing skills test. Wink, wink.
Oh, that thing.
But I took that class, and it was amazing because right away I knew I wanted to get into housing when I started to do my resume. And in the middle of that class, like in the middle of the semester, the internship popped up.
First time that the internship even existed, too.
Yes, the Bay Area Housing Internship Program. At first, the first email I got, I didn't read it. But then when someone else sent it to me, I read it, and I was like, this is what I want to do. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get in there, but I'm going to try because it sounded like it was very competitive. So when I wrote my essay to why I should be the one to be in this program, I told the truth. Maybe not as graphic as I told you guys today, but I told them enough of the truth to say, hey, I have the experience And I think that the only way you can help people is to have firsthand experience through life. You know, that's the only way that you'll be able to understand the population that you're trying to help.
And now that you've been at this a year, do you think it's helped? Your firsthand experience, has it helped you in your job?
It actually has helped me. It helped me to understand, since I work in the corporate office, I've never worked in a corporate office before.
So you work at Mercy
Yes.
Housing in California.
Yes.
Okay. And what's your job title?
Project assistant. Halfway through the internship, they hired me permanently.
Yeah, because you were that good. Yeah. So, her binder is sitting right here, and it's huge. It's all of her work portfolio, so it's very, very impressive.
So they hired me permanently, and I dedicated, to do whatever I can to help people. And it kind of scares me sometimes, being in corporate. I've never worked in corporate before. In sociology class, you learn about the different socioeconomic statuses, and especially like in your job with the glass ceiling, all of those different things that you learn in school, you never thought you needed then. But then when you actually start living in that environment and getting up and going to work in those environments that you learn about, it's like, wow, I'm actually doing these things and actually witnessing, all the things we talk about in sociology.
Well, tell us some of your projects. I know you told me a little bit earlier, but tell our listeners.
So I'm a project assistant, and one of the biggest projects that I work on is Sunnydale. Sunnydale is the biggest housing project in San Francisco, which is about 50 acres of public housing projects. So you can just imagine the history of things that go on over there. Gun violence, death, all that stuff. Like, it's horrific.
Do you know how old it is?
It's about as old as all the other projects in San Francisco. Okay. Actually, I have a fact sheet somewhere. I'll look for it. But I do want to tell you a little bit about Sunnydale. 1941.
Okay.
So it's been here since 1941.
Yeah, tell us about Sunnydale.
Since it's 50 acres, it has to be broken down in phases. And we are developing, right now we just demolished phase 1, which is going to be 167 units that are going up in 2 buildings. And I believe the majority of them are set aside for the residents that are already in Sunnydale, because they had to relocate in order for us to tear down their building or their apartments. So we're giving them the opportunity to move there first, if they want to move there. So anyway, 2 buildings, 167 units is massive. The architect won an award for the design of the building. And it's about 5 stories. So I guess there's a lot of space there. My concern, though, is, being in affordable housing, a lot of the designs of these, the housing projects that we're working on are buildings. And when I think about buildings, okay, we build affordable housing and we're building these buildings, but it reminds me so much of Chicago in New York, where you have those project buildings. And you never know, maybe 20 years from now, that's what they're going to start turning out to be, They're either going to be those project buildings, or they're going to be, too unaffordable for people. So that's just one of my concerns about being in development, working on this.
Is Sunnydale... Can you compare it to your experiences living in projects in San Francisco? Is it very different?
No, we actually work with the community a lot. We do resident meetings with them all the time. I was project managing the lease revision, which is us being able to incorporate culture shift into a lease that can be used by all the residents. Mm-hmm. So we actually just took the lease, the typical lease that people would sign, and revise the whole thing every section of it, shortened it, and included resident feedback on the lease, so their input could be in there, and this would be the lease that we would use throughout the whole Sunnydale. So I worked on this project.
What kind of feedback were you getting?
Just the different quiet time hours, or the time where you could pay your rent. Like a typical lease would say your rent is late after 5 days. But we changed it to 10 because most residents were giving us their feedback saying, "Hey, I don't get paid until the 7th," or "I don't get paid until the end of the month. Can we have more time?" And we gave that to them. Another thing with Sunnydale is I know people there that I grew up with.
Really?
Yeah. So every time I go over there, I actually see people that I know, and they live there now. And so they complain to me sometimes. They say, "Hey, one of the things I got was like, why are you tearing down our townhome and then you're just going to give us an apartment in a building?" So that was kind of a concern, which I kind of felt the same way. Like, it didn't make sense to me. Like, if I have my own townhouse, why would I want to move to an apartment in a building? But if it's new, then hopefully we can get people to go on the new side, the new side of things.
Are there any other reasons why people don't want to go to the new buildings?
Change scares everyone, especially they don't know what they're going to get into. If you're so used to a certain way for so long, some people have been living there 20, 40 years, and they're used to their ways, whether they pay low rent, no rent, or whatever, and then to know that affordable housing developer is coming in to change things. Affordable housing has to increase the rent every year to keep up with the market, keep up with...
How much is that usually?
I don't know.
Okay.
I know it goes up by a percentage, but it's different for every project.
Right. Oh, okay.
Because some of our developments house chronically seniors or formerly homeless or developmentally disabled. So it's just different. And we go by AMI, which is the average medium income, which is like, it goes up from like 20, 30, 40, 60%, depending on the area. So like if you say San Francisco's 60% average medium income is going to be a certain amount of number. It gives you a number of what the rent should be, And when you're doing these funding applications to fund your project, you have to put in these AMIs, but they have to be approved, by the state or wherever we send our funding applications. So we have to use these AMIs to determine what the rent is going to be. There's also other things like Section 8. Since we're doing this conversion with public housing, Section 8 is going to be attached to the units, and only the units, not the person. So the person can't take it with them. So Section 8 will be attached to the units where whatever the person is paying now, they will continue to pay in the new unit.
That's nice for them.
Yeah.
That's good. What about gangs or turf warfare you were talking about from your experiences? Are you seeing that at all in Sunnydale?
So Mercy Housing knew about this before I came on board. And what happened was, when I was younger, they used to have this really big building called Geneva Towers, which is part of Visitation Valley. And then they had Sunnydale. Sunnydale and Visitation are right across the street from each other, just like West Point and Harbor Road. And they used to beef with each other, shoot to kill, like crazy. They tore down the towers and built these townhomes and apartments over there, but they still beef with each other. And a lot of people from Visitation don't go to Sunnydale, and a lot of people from Sunnydale don't go to Visitation. But with the culture shift that we are bringing to the community, we're trying to reunite these communities. In this summertime, we work with the youth, and we brought youth from both sides to come together in Sunnydale to, participate in our program, our summer youth program. So that's a big milestone, if you ask me, bringing the turfs together. Then also in Sunnydale, 50 Acres, they have the top of Sunnydale and they have the bottom of Sunnydale, and they used to beef with each other, the top and the bottom.
Oh my gosh.
But they have people working that are residents from Sunnydale working for Mercy Housing that have been out there trying to band-aid these neighborhoods together, going to the top, going to the bottom, trying to bring the whole neighborhood together to end the violence and, you know, be a neighborhood.
Is it working?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. They put a lot of work into making it happen, and it works. So I can't believe it's happening, but it actually is. It's really helping. It's happening, and it's about time.
Good.
I don't even know where these gangs started out here. It's like when Tupac and Biggie had it out, it's like for real, everyone turned into Tupac or Biggie. And most of us out here was Tupac, you know?
You have to be. It's California.
It was crazy. That whole rap culture changed the streets. Rap and drugs changed the streets.
Really?
Yes.
So, your future, where do you see yourself going with this? Your internship has, well, it actually ended about 6 months ago when they hired you officially. But are you going to keep working here? What are your
I still do
projects?
the internship too.
Oh, okay.
So they allowed me to continue the internship and
Okay.
be hired permanently.
Okay. So you're doing the workshops.
Yes.
And, okay.
Yes, absolutely. I am like hungry for education any way I get it. So, my future with housing, I do see myself working in, you know, housing. I don't know if it's going to be development or property management. I'm kind of like on the fence about both because I want to work directly with people.
Right.
In the office in development, you work with your coworkers. You don't really see people too much unless you have a neighborhood meeting or something. But I know we're still doing good here. I just want to do more good. I guess, you know, through all my experiences in life, I feel like I have to do more. Eventually, I do want to open up my own nonprofit to help homeless, to help, you know, the people. I wanted to take you around the corner from our building and show you what our streets look like from this building, what our streets look like. There are so many people out here on drugs and they're homeless, and sometimes I wonder who's helping them, who actually takes the initiative to go talk to these people and see what they need, you know, and I don't really see that happening, so I want to be that person, you know. I can't do it from work, but sometimes I talk to people, I ask them how they're doing and stuff, or if I can help them. I give them food when I walk by sometimes, so I try to do that much, but in Contra Costa is just as bad with homelessness. Like, the house I lived in previous to the one I am in now, it was so many homeless over there that they would come to my house and ask for stuff like water, or do I have a food or sandwich? Do I have clean socks? You know, because, and it was so sad. I used to just go outside and talk to them and say, what's going on? Like, what happened? If I have a nonprofit, what kind of services do you need that I can help you with? So they would talk to me, and I would write down stuff. So I still feel like eventually I want to fulfill that, you know, that need in the community. So I'm here now, gaining as much experience as I can, learning a lot of things about development and housing. To me, development is like a catch-22 because when you're building, you're also tearing down. And I see a lot of trees go down. So I kind of feel at odds with that. Like, I don't want to be a part of that, you know, destruction of the earth. I believe that we need more trees, you know. In a minute, I feel like if development continues, then, and it's not just Mercy Housing, but any housing, if all this development continues, there's not going to be any land left where a child would know what grass looks like or things like that unless you own your house, you know. So I kind of value those things about the earth, that there are still places like where I live where they have grass and they have trees and stuff like that. So I value going home, even if it takes me like an hour or 2 hours to get there. I value going home every day because when I come to San Francisco, it's like buildings and water. That's all I see.
Oh, buildings and water.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bleak.
Well, you got to think, I grew up in Virginia from elementary school, and all we had was trees everywhere.
Right.
Trees and grass and everything. So, um,
Did you see your children? Because they probably had that transition, like halfway through their life, going from buildings and trees or buildings and water to living in Contra Costa with a little more land. Did their outlook on life change at all?
well, I think my son was bored. My son felt like he had more action going on, and that was
Okay.
like scary to me because he wanted to get into more things. You know, he had a lot going on, and it's good that I cut that cord early. When I moved him out there, he made a lot of diverse friends. They weren't just black, they were like all different colors. And that's what made me like, this is what I want in my children. I want them to be diversified, you know, acceptance of everyone, and have a life outside of all that drama that I had to deal with. I always want the best for them. Where the first house we moved to, it had grass everywhere. I think we even had a tree outside, and we'd like to plant stuff all the time. So, yeah, they transitioned. We go swimming and stuff. They like that type of stuff.
Well, LaJeanne, this was such an interesting interview. You have a really fascinating story that needs to become a movie or a book or something. I know we're only touching on the very tip of it regarding housing, but you are remarkable, and you're a first-generation student and an honors student, and you've done so much, and you've done the BayHip internship, and we're so happy to have you working in housing in some capacity. And I hope to see you continuing and maybe starting that nonprofit for
Absolutely.
homeless
Would you
people.
come be a part of our
I
board?
would absolutely become a part of it. I would trust you to lead that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for doing this interview.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me.